Hi guys, it is Friday and it's 2 o'clock, so that means it's time for our Family Friday program. So welcome to the museum in northern Arizona. Look at this beautiful scenery that we have behind us. If you're not from Flagstaff, look at all the beautiful snow that we got just in the last few days. But really look at the beautiful ponderosa pine trees. We're really lucky to live in such a beautiful area with these beautiful trees. And the ponderosa pine trees, they don't grow everywhere. This is a really special environment here on the Colorado Plateau for these ponderosa pine trees. And we're going to talk today about forest fires because we can protect our forests and these beautiful ponderosa pine trees from being damaged by wildfires. And we're going to learn all about today what are the things that you would need to have a fire, because people start forest fires. So it's one of the ways that forest fires get started. So what are the ingredients that you have to have to start a fire? How can we protect the forest? How can we be better stewards and stop forest fires from happening? And we'll also talk today about why is it, because some fires, low burning, controlled kind of fires, have been happening for ages and they are actually healthy for the forest. But it's the huge wildfires that we've been hearing almost every summer about. And we're going to talk all about that today. And you're going to get to meet two special friends today. But first, before we go anywhere else, I have a couple vocabulary words for you so you can keep your listening ears open for when we're talking about these words and you'll remember what they mean. The first one is fuel. Well, you might have heard of that word before, like if your family is going to put fuel or like gas into our vehicles. Well, that's the word fuel. And fuel just doesn't have to be the gas that we put in our automobiles. Fuel is a material such as coal, gas, wood, paper, anything that can burn is what fuel is. Then the other important word that you're going to hear today is oxygen. Oxygen is a chemical element and a fancy scientific word for air. So the air we breathe, the scientific word is oxygen, and you're going to hear that today. So we're going to go on an adventure out to the forest station and meet a couple of my friends. Come on. Oh, hello, everybody. We are here. What is this place actually called?
This is the Mormon Lake Work Center here on the Coconino National Forest.
Okay, so the Forest Service owns this area,
Yep,
right?
that's correct.
Let me introduce you to some of my friends. First of all, this is my friend Karen. Karen and I do jazzercise together. That's how we keep fit. And she's out in the woods all the time. And then this is my friend Andrew. So I'm so glad that you guys could do this with us. What are we gonna talk about today?
So Mary, you wanted to know about fire in the forest, right?
Yes.
So in order for there to be fire, 3 elements need to come together. What do you think one of those elements is?
I think that you're going to have something to have heat, something to burn.
A heat, okay, a source of heat, that's one of them. And then you also said something to burn. That would be fuel. Let's call that fuel.
That was one of our vocabulary words today.
Very good. And then the third thing we need to have fire is oxygen, which is in the air all around us.
That was another vocabulary
So
word.
heat, fuel, and oxygen are also what each of us as humans need too to live.
Oh, and look how they're making a triangle.
So here is the fire triangle, and We're going to want a close-up of that at
Yep.
some point.
Yeah. Look at that.
But let's talk about where all these elements come from. We already know oxygen is in the air all around us.
Yes.
Where does heat come from? What does Mother Nature provide that is so hot it will cause ignition? What is Mother Nature?
I'm thinking of the sun, but that's
Not the sun.
Not
If
the
it was
sun,
the sun,
then everything would be burning.
every time we would walk outside, we would burst
would
on
burn.
During the
fire.
monsoons, it makes a loud,
Yeah, but
thunderous.
think,
Oh, I got it.
what is it?
Lightning.
Lightning, right.
Lightning.
Lightning is several thousand degrees hot, and it is hot enough to ignite fuel. There's one other way Mother Nature also provides heat, and that is lava. Think of Hawaii, okay? Now, that's how Mother Nature provides heat that can create the fire triangle. Hold on to that. How do humans provide heat, make heat?
If you are smoking a cigarette, which is a nasty, nasty thing, and you throw that out on the side of the road or near our forest.
That could provide the heat, but what you had to light that cigarette with is a match. And a match, here's how a match works. Everybody put their hands together,
Okay.
rub them. What do you start feeling?
Heat.
Heat, okay, that's friction. And everything, just pretty much every way humans can make heat is using friction. Lighting a match, using a lighter is with friction, okay?
Okay.
So that's how humans, and now where does fuel? Can we look around? Dried pine needles are fuel. The trees, the branches on the ground are fuel. Unfortunately, our neighborhoods are fuel too. So
They can be.
they can. So the fire triangle, when firefighters like Andrew, when they want to control or suppress or put a fire out, they just break one side of the fire triangle. They take it away. How do we break the heat? How do we take away heat from a fire?
Water?
We pour water
Snow?
on it.
Water. Yep. Exactly.
And firefighters can deliver that water through a number of means, from hoses to buckets being carried by
I've
helicopters
seen that before.
to cool the fire, take the heat away. Now, how do we take away oxygen from a wildfire out in the forest?
By smothering it.
With?
Campfire, like with dirt?
With dirt, right.
Okay.
There's always dirt, which is why a shovel is a firefighter's favorite tool, right? So if you do both of these, you pour on some water to take away the heat, you shovel on some dirt to take away the oxygen.
And with that, you definitely have to stir it in. You can't just bury it, because eventually the fire will go out, but it will stay hot and smolder in there for several days. And that's why when it comes to our campfires, just burying it is not going to be the right way.
So what does this say?
That says if it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to leave, and we'll come back to that.
Okay.
But that definitely is true. We
Okay.
want to make sure that you don't leave a campfire that's still hot.
Okay.
And those are the ways Smokey Bear reminds us how to put a campfire out
I
and
love
be
your
safe.
little Smokey the Bear earrings today.
Now let's talk about fuel. How can we take away fuel from the fire triangle?
Well, around our house, rake up your pine needles and the dead leaves.
Good example.
Keep that
Good
clean
example,
around your
Mary.
house?
Yep.
Out
Yeah.
in the woods, I mean, I don't know.
That's
Out in the
actually-
woods, what do you do?
It's no different, actually. That is one of the main ways we do it, and we call them control lines or
Okay.
containment lines to contain the fire. Because if the fire has nothing more to burn, the fire is going to go out. So we use things like a little different version than a home version of a rake usually, but we remove that fuel from in front of the fire, so the fire will have no more to burn. And that can be done several different ways. When we're talking about big trees, we can remove the trees or the small ones and limb them up and everything.
Limb them up. When you say limb them up, what does that mean?
So trees have limbs coming out, and when they're close to the ground, that provides a source of ladder fuels, is what we call it, where it can take fire that's coming across the ground and bring it up into the crowns of the trees, which makes a really big fire. And so if we remove those lower limbs to keep the limbs from touching the ground and being that source of ladder fuel, that's one way we can keep the fire from spreading and everything.
And Andrew, you have fought fires?
Oh,
You've
yes.
been out in the woods and you have fought fires in this area and around the country?
Yes, that's
wow.
true. Yeah,
Thank you.
Well, it's what I do, and I enjoy it.
Good. So. What else do we have to learn today, Karen?
So, and back to fuel, you can just, as we drive around Flagstaff in northern Arizona, we see a lot of places in the forest where the fuel has been reduced. Trees have been cut, especially smaller trees, so there is less fuel to burn. So if there is a wildfire, the fire will behave differently. It won't be as bad as a fire.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Are we going to talk today? I don't know if this is a good time to talk about it or it's going to come up later in the program. Fires in the forest aren't necessarily a bad thing, right?
Right.
But when they become a bad thing is when all of these things are happening and they come out of control, and we call those wildfires. Those are not so good.
Well,
the really hot ones.
Unwanted fires,
Unwanted
When
fires.
there's
fire has a
this
role
one.
in the ecosystem. There's definitely many plants and animals, and the different vegetation require frequent fire to help keep them healthy and not have an overgrowth of trees and other things on the forest floor. Particularly in the ponderosa pine forest, it's naturally supposed to be about anywhere from 25 to 75 trees per acre.
Oh.
And what that does is it allows a lot of open areas with sunlight to hit the forest floor and grow various plants and flowers and that sort of thing. But too often, fire has not been able to play its natural role in the ecosystem, and you get an overgrowth. And then when a fire does happen, it makes it a lot hotter, a lot harder to control, and a lot more potential destructive fire. Whereas, natural fire in these ecosystems would have been relatively
like
low intensity,
Right.
and creeping across the forest floor, recycling the nutrients. A lot of nutrients are locked up in dead logs, pine needles, and when that burns, the ash is full of nutrients that will help grow the next generation of trees and plants and everything.
Wonderful.
So,
Now, isn't the ponderosa pine tree, isn't it kind of made to sustain these kind of low burning kind of fire? They're
absolutely.
made that way, right?
It's what we call fire adapted. And that means that, as we were talking about the ladder fuels, you don't see that so much on the ponderosa pine because they do what we call self-pruning.
Oh.
They drop, as they grow bigger, they drop their lower branches.
So the tree knows how to do that itself.
Exactly.
The ponderosa pine tree.
Because it's adapted with fire. It also has really thick bark to help protect the inner part of the tree from intense wildfire.
So, Barry, you can think of fire as the custodian of the forest. As it burns through the forest at a low intensity, it picks up the trash and it recycles the nutrients.
And it just does that naturally.
Yep.
Okay.
In fact, a healthy forest needs fire.
Needs that.
But
Okay.
the
But
key here
there's
is
always a but.
we don't want the general public starting the fires. We could have enough with lightning
Yeah.
and that sort of thing, or let the fire professionals do it with prescribed fire. But we don't want general people, kids, or their parents starting fires out in the forest. Just because fire can be good, it's not good every place.
Yes.
We want zero human-caused fires unless
Right.
they're done by the
professional.
Professional plan,
Okay.
like Andrew. So let's talk about some other fire safety messages, Andrew, and kind of maybe get back to some of our campfire messages here.
Exactly. So basically, as we were talking before, we do the same thing on the ground, fighting fire, as what you guys would do with your campfires. It's really no different aside from the scale or the size of the fire itself. So as Karen mentioned, that in order for fire to burn and continue burning, it needs all three elements. If we remove even just one side of it, it'll go out. So when we, as Karen was saying, with a campfire, we remove the oxygen by putting a bunch of dirt in there and stirring it around, making sure that it really gets put out. The heat, we mentioned using water. And the fuel part, if you take the fuel part away, it's basically by not putting anything more on there, allowing it to burn out. And if the fire doesn't have anything more to burn, it's going to go out. So
when you know you're going to go to bed, just stop putting more logs on the fire.
And then you still have to stay up and make sure that fire goes out. And, it's best to still put some water on it, stir it up and everything. We say here in the forest, drown, stir, feel. So first of all, you drowned it with water. Just pour a whole bunch of water in there.
Yeah. It takes a lot more water than what you think, doesn't
Yep.
it? It's not like just a little glass of
Especially if
water
you've
bottle.
had it going for a couple days, that heat goes down into the ground a couple feet sometimes.
Wow.
And so, I usually say 5 gallons is a good amount, and that should be separate from your drinking water and everything. If maybe you forgot or you burned through your water and you don't have any, maybe if it's the end of the weekend, take your cooler that has all the melted ice and you can dump that on there. That's
Good
a
idea,
possible
good
solution.
idea.
But drown it, then stir it all up, make that soup, make it really soupy and muddy and everything in there. And then lastly, you don't have to stick your hand in it.
yeah.
You keep it above it, but you just put it down there, just like you see here. You feel, and you're feeling for that heat with the back of your hand. If it's too hot for you to touch,
Right.
it's too hot to leave, because that could start a wildfire. And here on this part of the Coconino National Forest, abandoned campfires are our #1 human cause. Luckily, for the most years, we still have more natural lightning starting fires, but people end up causing quite a few fires, and abandoned campfires are the #1 way that they do.
And during the summers, lots of times around here, if you're not from Flagstaff, you may not know this, but we close down whole sections of forests so people aren't out there when it's our driest season having campfires. So when we close down the forest, so to say, that's a rule that you really need to follow. It's just not, oh, we're closing it down. For some people, we're closing it down. You are not to go in there and not to have fires, especially.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
There's a reason why we do that.
And before we even get to that point, we go into what we call fire restrictions, which means that we shut down people's ability or legally to have campfires. And we're usually in that stage for quite a while before we get to closures. Closures are the pretty much last step to avoid catastrophic wildfires or really destructive wildfires.
Okay.
And so, we usually, are in fire restrictions for a while, and those can have 2 stages even. One where you can only have, in stage 1 restrictions, you can't have them out in the general forest, but in the developed campgrounds, you're still able to have those during stage 1 fire restrictions. And then when we get into stage 2 restrictions, that's no fires anywhere unless they're propane fueled with an on-off switch that can be turned off. And once they're turned off, they're not the issue.
Not a danger.
Yep.
Restrictions
Yep.
are.
We like to say know before you go. So know the rules of the place you're going to ahead of time. And there are so many ways, as already mentioned, there's websites, there's at the offices themselves. When we go into restrictions, we actually put up our signs, both electronic on some of the major highways, as well as them on entrances into the forest as well. So pay attention to that as well.
Okay.
How about
What's next?
How about some other messages that are good for people to know when they come visit the forest, Andrew?
Ones that aren't directly fire related?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just
yeah.
good to know.
Well,
Other good things to know.
definitely you want to try to leave no trace. And what that means is if you go into the forest with packages of food and all that kind of stuff, you come out with those, you don't leave it behind. You clean up after yourself. So not only is it good for you the next time, it's good for the other forest visitors. It's nice and clean, because nobody likes to camp in a dirty forest that has a bunch of trash and that sort of thing. That's one of the biggest things. Another thing would be if your family likes to ATV or UTV, or even if you have some big off-road type vehicles, know which roads you're allowed to be on, because not every road out there in this forest is meant for public traffic and that sort of thing. So we have the motor vehicle use travel maps available in a paper copy, as well as you can upload it to your phones or your smart devices, and that will tell you, and it's even perfect because it's got a little blue dot that shows you exactly where you are, so you can't get lost.
Oh, good.
And if you're on a road, that's the roads that you're able to be on will be listed there. So if you find yourself way out in the green, you know that you're on roads that you shouldn't be on, and that sort of thing.
So just because you see a dirt road out in the woods doesn't necessarily mean you are allowed to be driving a recreational vehicle on it.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
I didn't know that. That's
And the reason why is because we want to protect some of the other habitat in the forest, the soils, the meadows, the wildlife habitat. So driving around is not always a good thing.
Yep. And a lot of those roads are in existence because they were meant to be temporary roads or temp roads, and they've just been kept open because people keep on driving on them when they were supposed to kind of grow back over and everything. It was temporary, but they weren't designed to be long term.
Okay.
So that's why there's a bunch out there that aren't open to the public.
Did you have another appointment this afternoon?
Well, I do have to go find my friend out in the woods.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot for meeting with us today.
Absolutely.
We'll see
Thank
in
you,
the
everyone.
forest.
And remember that fire does have a role to play, but it's not something that you guys should be starting out there on your own.
So usually with our program, we always make a craft, or we do some little scientific experiment that goes with our program. And it's always things, I was telling Karen this, it's always things that you would have at home. So in order to do this demonstration, you need a glass jar, and you have to have a lid, right?
With the lid, yeah.
With the lid, and either a little tea candle or a birthday candle. You have some kind of clay.
I've got some clay.
Or some Play-Doh.
Yeah.
In the bottom of your glass, so your candle, especially if you're using a birthday candle, it will stick in there. So tell us what we're gonna find out here.
So,
Karen?
Mary, here's a way we can demonstrate the fire triangle in a jar.
Okay.
So right here, I have the fire triangle. Let's review.
Okay.
Where's the oxygen?
Coming in.
where is the fuel? It's the birthday candle. And where is the heat going to come from?
Your matches.
Matches. So again, this is something to do with
An adult.
an adult.
Get help.
I'm going to use friction to light the match.
And sometimes oxygen can go against us too.
Yeah. If there's too much wind, it'll actually separate the fuel from the heat.
Ah.
Okay, so first of all, let's think, how would we take away the heat from this fire triangle? And see that?
What?
The bottle. We would want to spray water on it.
Yeah.
So if I sprayed water
Drown
on it, this will put it out.
Wow, it's really sizzling.
It's burning off some of that water.
Yeah. Oh, there it goes.
Okay, so how would I take away the fuel from this fire triangle? Actually, I could go in with the little scissors, I could snip it off, or we could just wait and stand here and wait, and the fire will end up consuming the whole candle. It will consume all the fuel, and then it will go out.
Okay.
And because we have put our fire triangle in a jar, we have the ability to take the oxygen away. Now, we don't have a lid for a jar out in the forest, but when I put the lid on, you will hear this little fire trying to get more oxygen.
Oh! Oh my gosh!
So, a fire needs oxygen so much, it actually pulls in air. It can create actually some of its own wind. So now, let's talk about what's left in the jar. What does that jar look like?
It looks like there's smoke.
It's kind of smoky in there. So smoke is made up of little tiny particulates of unburned fuel. Okay, just little particulates.
Now, what's a particulate?
Just a little tiny piece that actually gets separated and it's light enough to float in the air. Yeah, particulates. But is there any oxygen left in here?
I'm going to say no.
The oxygen has all been consumed by the flame, and what's left is carbon monoxide.
Ooh.
Okay.
That's dangerous.
Yeah, not good to breathe, but carbon dioxide. So that's a fire triangle in a jar.
Wow. So you can do this experiment with permission and with help from an adult at home. What else do you have?
Well, and I think we were going to have a special guest come by.
Yes?
He wanted to check in with how our learning about fire in the forest session was going. Let's see if he's ready.
Okay.
So we're so glad, Mary, that you and our friends at the Museum of Northern Arizona got to join us today to learn about fire in the forest. And look who's here! Smokey Bear!
Oh, how cool!
Hey, Smokey, I think you heard. We were
Family
chatting
Friday.
with Mary from the Museum of Northern Arizona and her friends with Family Friday, and we were learning about fire in the forest. We covered the fire triangle with heat and fuel and oxygen. We talked about fire safety and campfire safety, and we even threw in a couple of messages about leave no trace. Yay!